And awkward first sentence because we're live and we're not good at going live. Dixon, how are you doing?
I'm recovering from an episode of self-imposed mania. How are you?
I'm doing good. For anybody who
Yes.
missed it, we went live, not live, but we sort of reconvened on this platform before hitting the live button. And Dixon, you spilled water and you had an argument with a microphone. And
Yes. Yes, I did.
yes, and so Dixon's coming in a bit salty today.
And I'm ready to take it out on whichever one of these people is deserving.
Well, hopefully, because we have been you because I deal with the comments. We do get trolley comments, and those are my favorite because
Oh,
it's amazing how angry people get when they disagree. Lots of
is that
punctuation.
has the first part of this gone up on our site yet?
The first, yes, it is live on the site. And for anybody who
Ah,
just to do a proper intro, so last week we did the Tommy Ziegler quadruple murder case. Tommy Ziegler on death row for about 45 years. If it's a case you're not familiar with and you're tuning into this now, I'd recommend watching the first 2 minutes of our show last week just to get yourself caught up. Another thing you can do if you're watching this recorded is Google or search on YouTube the Unsolved Mysteries Tommy Ziegler episode, and it does a good job of giving a fairly decent summary. And you mentioned in the previous episode, which everybody should watch, there are some biases from the perspective of Unsolved Mysteries. However, today we've done a lot of the groundwork, and we're going to be going into looking at the stories from Tommy Ziegler, his story, because we talked about the prosecution story. I may be going out because I'm having my show internet issues. Can you hear me still?
I can hear you just fine.
Okay, so just a heads up, it's telling me something wonky may happen. The fun of going live. Anyway, we're going to be going back into Tommy Ziegler's actual story and comparing that, corroborating that with some of the witness testimony. We're going to take a look at Charlie Mays, who was one of the victims on the night. We're going to look at Felton Thomas, who is Charlie May's friend, who was involved in the evening and was also one of the main, I guess, drivers as to how and why Tommy Ziegler's on death row, along with Edward Williams, who was, I guess, part-time under the table employee who was very much involved in this, according to the prosecution, from June up until December 24th when the crime happened. But Dixon, I think, again, you know this better than I. Where would you start in digging into Tommy Ziegler's story? What would be a good starting point for you, just to really dig that one down?
Well, I think we should just start with last week, and again, for those of you just tuning in, we went through the prosecution's narrative. And so obviously, even in the trial, they go first, and then it's up to the defense to respond if they wish to put on the defense. And so I think we start with that and Ziegler's version of what happened. And the first thing to understand about this, and again, if you didn't tune in last week, one of the elements that sort of precipitated or was part of sort of, from the prosecution's perspective, the planning of this crime was this notion that Charlie Mays, who wound up becoming one of the victims, was brought in by Ziegler to the furniture store that night under the pretext of being able to pick up a television set that Ziegler was going to make sure that he got for his family for Christmas. And Ziegler arranged for special credit and all this stuff. And so Mays was there to pick up this television set, according to the prosecution. But that was all a front from Ziegler's perspective. It was to draw Mays into the store so he could murder him and then frame him for what Ziegler himself had done. And I bring that up now because off the bat, Ziegler denies. This is I think an important part of his version of events. He denies that Charlie Mays was ever to come pick up that television set. He actually denies that in its entirety. So his story begins sort of differently as a result of that. And sorry, I just lost my place here. Pardon me a second. This is horrible.
It's okay. So we're talking about, and this was something that we discussed last week whilst you're looking up your place. Because this will come back up again when we talk about Charlie Mays and looking at him in greater detail, because that's a story that there is some witness testimony that there was some arrangement. Now, Tommy Ziegler, I didn't realize he denied that completely then, that Charlie Mays was due to come to the store at any point.
Yes, he did. And that obviously puts a different spin on things, because from his perspective, basically Charlie Mays therefore is there without an explanation. That's part of his story. Right. So he denies that, and I'm sorry about losing my place. Everyone agrees that Mays and his wife stopped in the store that morning and bought linoleum. A 16-year-old migrant worker by the name of Brian Ned had also accompanied them. This is Charlie Mays. The story about the television comes from Charlie Mays' wife, but she is really giving hearsay in that she's saying, well, this is what my husband told me. And Brian Ned claims he overheard that conversation as well. And they both apparently agree on the price, which was $128 for the television. So
Brian Ned, wasn't he working at the store, Brian Ned? So he witnessed this as a shop.
No, assistant. I think he was Charlie Mays's buddy. This is not the guy who there are a couple of guys that Ziegler used, including his friend, the one who he swapped cars with and whose name is escaping. Curtis Dunaway, that's his name. But no, this Brian Ned apparently was a friend of the Mayses, and they supposedly independently corroborate that Ziegler intended to sell Charlie Mays this television set, and that they agreed on the price, $128. Now, of course, since they're family friends, I'm sure if you're Ziegler, you could say, well, they could have coordinated that story. So there you have it, right?
Did Ziegler, just on that, because you know a bit more about this transaction. So was there ever any confirmation from Ziegler if there was a price agreed on the TV? Was that TV picked up on the day, or was he going to?
I don't think the television was ever picked up. And again, Ziegler denies that he ever. In fact, Ziegler says he was selling the television for $350, and he could not sell it for less than that because it was on consignment and it was not his. So he was basically selling it.
Pretty much saying that Charlie May's wife is lying. Or
correct.
She pretty much is the only. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's either a lying or misremembers or whatever, or he can't explain it, but he says this did not happen. Okay. So that sets the stage for the rest of Ziegler's story, which is on what happened, that night. And this is my attempt to assemble a clear timeline based on what he has said. So, at 6 p.m., he and his employee closed the store for the Christmas holiday. And then he goes home with his employee, that Curtis Dunaway, and they switch cars, which we talked about last time. Ziegler confirms that, yes, so we switch cars so that Dunaway can go visit his family. Ziegler had bought a new, I think, Cadillac. And so he switched for Dunaway's Oldsmobile. And this is what happens. And Ziegler says that Dunaway was there. And this is something that Dunaway confirms. He was there, had a piece of cake. He saw everybody and left shortly before 6:40, 7 o'clock. So like we talked about last week, probably around 6:45. So far, the prosecution and Ziegler are pretty much, except for this bit about Mays, their timeline for the night is the same. Ziegler go ahead.
Oh, so I was going to say, what I'm going to do is I'm going to write down should we write down some established facts that we can agree to, just to kind of get a timeline? Yeah, maybe just for fun. It's just something I thought of, and the best ideas we have are the ones that we don't plan, and I just sort of chuck out there. So I thought, what the hell?
I mean, like the one where I lose my place, for example.
That's a great one.
That's right, exactly.
Let me go to share screen here. I've got a little Google Doc set up. So
you know what my problem is? I'm running two different screens at the same time, and I'm confusing myself. Yes.
So we have 6:45 p.m. We can agree that Dunaway.
Yes.
Dunaway is at the Ziegler house, and we can place with Tommy Ziegler. So
I would call that a soft 6:45, but
well, we'll just say all of this is based on witness testimony on the night that was for a
right.
lot of people
But nobody
stressful.
can give you the exact time, which is actually, I mean, I know that seems like, okay, 6:42, 6:38, who cares? Well, you'll see as we go forward, the timelines here are kind of, in a circumstantial case, they become somewhat important.
Yeah. Well, that's why I think we understand whenever we give times, there's going to be some variability in 10, 15 minutes here and there. But we can even say first, we know at the beginning of this story that everybody's putting together, Tommy Ziegler is at the house of Tommy Ziegler with Curtis Dunaway.
Curtis Dunaway.
Okay, so we know that this is the case at circa 6:45-ish.
At circa 6:45-ish, exactly. Okay. And nobody is disputing that. So what we have is, so they're there. And then at that point, this is where the accounts start to diverge, because Ziegler claims now that his wife and parents go to the store to pick out the chair that he has promised to purchase them. And again, we talked about this last time. This was his pretext for getting them, according to the prosecution, his pretext for getting them into the store was to, say, oh, I'm going to buy you this. You're going to pick out a piece of furniture for your home for Christmas.
Yeah.
And so he says the wife and the parents left by themselves while he waited around for Ed Williams for a pre-made appointment, which was supposed to be, according to Ziegler, at 7 o'clock. Ed Williams, of course, claims that it was supposed to be 7:30.
So just to sort of summarize here, I'm just going to keep going. I just want to make sure that we're going step by step here. So 6:45-ish, Curtis Dunaway there has a piece of cake. Do we know if Curtis Dunaway is confirming his in-laws and his wife are there? I would assume so.
Yes, he is. And everyone agrees the cake was delicious.
Cake was delicious. So cake delicious.
Right.
Okay, so cake was delicious. Curtis Dunaway leaves, and then what happens next is we're getting into speculation territory. But we then have to make the assumption from what you're saying is somehow, some way, according to Tommy Ziegler, his in-laws and his wife head to a furniture shop to what arguably is to pick out a piece of furniture for Christmas or something. I think it was a Lazy Boy is what he said.
Right. Well, if we believe Tommy Ziegler, this is indeed, it's not a furniture shop, it's his furniture shop, and his gift to his in-laws is take what you like, for Christmas.
Well, I think we can say on that timeline. So this timeline that I'm adding on here is what I'm calling what we're confirming we're happy with, because we know that at somewhere there we know that there was something happened between 7 and 7:30 in that shop that involved those people that are currently at the Ziegler residence. So I think we can safely say at circa 7 p.m. the in-laws and his wife went to the store. Or is that not what Tommy is saying?
No, well, I mean, it is what he's saying. I think I don't know that you can safely say that at least they went to the store. The prosecution, I think, would add that so did Tommy Ziegler, and that he's not admitting it.
But that's what I mean. So we know that Eunice, Virginia, and Perry were definitely there at 7 p.m.
Roughly, yes. But they were certainly there at around that time. Absolutely.
Yes. Virginia. Right. At the furniture store.
Now, so Ziegler claims, again, he says he's waiting for Ed Williams for this appointment that he claims was supposed to be at 7 o'clock and that Ed Williams will later claim was for 7:30. Williams, he says was running late, so he tired of waiting, did Ziegler, and decided that we're going to this party, which we talked about last time. This party that he and his wife had agreed to go to at a friend's house, and so we need to get some bourbon for the party. So he leaves a note for Williams saying that he'll be back in 10 minutes and hops in his car and runs to the bourbon, or attempts to run to the bourbon store. But before getting there, decides that it's too late. He's annoyed, whatever. And he turns around and comes back without ever getting to wherever it was he was going to buy the bourbon. And obviously also not buying the bourbon. So this is a bit of an odd part of the story, because it certainly sounds like he's trying to account for time for which he really doesn't have anything.
It's a strange one. I think we said last week that that was a bit of a strange element to the story, because he took the time. He was worried about being late and he takes the time to, because let's think about it this way. When you write a sign, if you were sitting in your house and you were going to, am I going to get bourbon? Am I not? Keeping in mind, this is at most a 10-minute trip in Winter Garden, Florida. He can get bourbon within a mile and a half at Winter Garden, Florida. So he took the time and effort to create a sign and put it on the door. Now, we all have tape and we have pen, markers and paper or whatever. It's not necessarily a quick thing, like you need to get, it takes 3 minutes to kind of sort that out. So time wasn't an issue for him at that stage. And he gets all
although he claims that it was at trial, so that's interesting.
This is why I find this a weird element, because if I'm thinking I'm going to the store to get bourbon, I've committed that this is 10 minutes. I'll be there and back. I'm putting a sign up. It's not that big a deal. The only thing that would change my mind is if I realize, what, the bourbon is a half hour away. This is stupid. This is where he lives. He's probably been to this bourbon store multiple times. I'm just highlighting the weirdness in this part because it just seems just strange.
Let's remember this is also Florida, not our great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, where bourbon is acquirable, especially back in 1975 when this happened in Pennsylvania on Christmas Eve at 7:00. You were shit out of luck if you wanted bourbon. But here in Florida, no, boy, the liquor's, well, maybe it's 7:00 by 7:00 on Christmas Eve, maybe. But I got to tell you, they're open till 9, 10 o'clock. They're customer friendly. Oh, it's just amazing.
Love it.
But in Florida, yes, you could get bourbon at any gas station. Well, maybe not gas station. I don't know about that, but like certainly there were multiple non-state run facilities for which to acquire your bourbon. But he doesn't. He fails to do this despite, he claims, getting in the car and starting out for it.
Yeah.
He claims he left around 10 after 7 for this. He says 5 to 10 minutes. He says Ed Williams is about 5 to 10 minutes late for his appointment, which again, he claims was supposed to be 7:00. So if we assume therefore around 10 after 7, he's like, all right, that's it. I'm going to go get the bourbon. But then he gets about halfway there or something and then turns around and goes back home. And so how much time could this have taken? I think generously he's back home by 7:30. And that's really, that seems to me to like probably take too long, 20 minutes to kind of do a half run to the bourbon store.
Do we have any confirmation from Tommy Ziegler how long he said he was out, turned around and came back?
I don't think so. What he does say is that when he got back, Ed Williams is waiting for him now.
Okay.
And I think Ed Williams did claim that he was there at 7:30. So this is, obviously it's somebody trying to account for something. Is it Ed Williams saying, see, I was there at 7:30, and it's his story that he's trying to kind of massage to fit Ziegler's time? Or is it the other way around? Is it Ziegler saying, okay, I saw Tommy Ziegler at 7, or I saw Ed Williams at 7:30, but here's why I wasn't there at 7:20 when he might have arrived, or at 7:25 because of his little bourbon run,
So I'm not saying that this is, and I'm trying to go into this stream kind of, I have my biases at this stage, but I'm trying to pretend like, okay, I'm going to give Tommy Ziegler the chance here.
Right. Well, this, by the way, is during the prosecution. This window to about 7:30. This is when the in-laws and his wife are murdered.
Yeah. So we have about we know, well, and one of the pieces of evidence that I discussed last week was the police found a bullet in a clock on the wall at the furniture shop, and it had stopped at 7:24. So a gun was fired in the furniture shop at 7:24. Now this is Florida, so it's possible that there was a gun that went off accidentally before his parents showed up and were killed. Guns go off all the time in Florida, but it's a big gap of time for his story to be correct, because if we're charitable and he leaves at 7:10, 7:15, he's halfway to the liquor store. It's going to take him 5 minutes to get halfway there minimum. And turn around. So that's 10 minutes. There's missing time here right now already in Tommy Ziegler's story, which is suspect.
Yes. And his next part of the story, let's say he gets back at 7:20, which I think is more realistic. And assuming that he's telling us the truth. He then says that he and Williams then drive to the furniture store when he arrives back. So, okay, maybe they take a minute or two to chit chat. It's about 5 minutes to the furniture store. And whatever, we'll put some air into it and say they get to the furniture store right around 7:30, and at this point, and again, in his version, now his in-laws are dead. He doesn't know this, but his in-laws and his wife are dead. The first thing that he says happens when he arrives there is they go into this inside the store, and Ziegler is hit hard from behind, which causes him to lose his glasses. He sees two blurs coming at him. He also falls over, and so he tries to get up. He apparently kept a 22 in his trouser holster, which, okay, and tries to fire some shots with it. But the gun jams at least twice, and so instead he throws it at his assailants, is what he claims. So he's now being assaulted. He's been hit once. He's been knocked down. His glasses are off. He can't really see. He grabs the gun in his holster because he's Wyatt Earp, and the gun misfires. And so now, in a panic, he just chucks it at them. Then there's more scuffling. He's thrown around the store a bit until he is thrown into his own desk near the back of the store. He remembers there is a .357 Magnum in the drawer of that desk. So I guess fortunately for him, he's thrown into the desk, which jars his memory. And so he, in the dark, and despite the fact that he's being beaten and has no glasses, opens the correct drawer, pulls out the .357 Magnum, and he thinks he's tried firing it. He thinks he tried firing it, but he can't say for sure. He can't say how many shots he got off, or even if he got any. He thinks maybe the gun was emptied. Then he starts swinging it like a club, he says, when there were no more bullets coming, and he's sure that he hit somebody with it hard, that he really did clock someone with it. Next, he's knocked back to the floor, at which point he loses this .357 Magnum. And before he can get back up, he is shot once through the abdomen. At that point, he becomes disoriented and things are fuzzy. And he's sure, though, that he hears a white man say, "Mays has been hit. Kill him."
So does he say white man?
He does.
He hears a white man.
Yes.
So is that his racial bias at the time on what black people sound like?
Well, I mean, certainly. I mean, listen, and I know that in England where you are, I think for Americans, one of the really incongruous things that happens when you're in England is that we are used to in America, there is a black English dialect. It's a thing. Yeah.
My wife can't understand it.
So it's been studied, you know what I mean? Like there are scholarly articles I've assigned my students about it. So it's not something that we need to dance around or be ashamed of. I mean, it is a thing.
Yeah.
And not every black person speaks with it. Obviously, there are black people here, as there are in your country and everywhere, who are raised in predominantly white neighborhoods or predominantly upper class neighborhoods or whatever it is, and they do not wind up having what you can call, for lack of a better term, the black dialect accent. But lots and lots of black people do. And so presumptively he hears someone who, quote unquote, at least sounds white. Maybe I don't know that he can really confirm that he's white, but he says it's a white man. So I mean, he's probably, that is the presumptive, right? That, if you hear someone who speaks English in a particular way, they must be white. Yes.
So what's occurring, there's a few things I want to come back to on this, but just whilst I have this in my mind, what occurs to me, if we go back to the prosecution's case where they think he's trying to frame two black men, it's notable that he references a white guy.
Yes.
So it's if he was trying to frame, so you would make the argument if he was trying. Now, I guess we could say he's being extra clever, but if you're trying to frame a black guy and you would say, "I heard the voice, he sounded like he was a black guy," then that would be more fitting with somebody who's trying to frame two black guys.
It is, and you raise an interesting point that I've never thought about. That is certainly, if this is him lying, it adds a level of complication that doesn't really do him any favors, because it puts another remove of things. I mean, is it his, let's say he did it and that this is his guilty conscience, sort of like not allowing him to go the full Monty and blame, outright blame the black people, because supposedly he had a decent relationship with black people in the in the area. So maybe his guilty conscience is not permitting him to fully, verbalize what his actions, certainly in terms of who he's framing, the picture he's trying to paint. But on the other hand, I guess, from Ziegler, from the supporters of Ziegler, from their perspective, he, this is what he heard. I mean, you heard what you heard. You report what you heard.
Yeah.
So I don't know. He does repeat those words a little bit differently every time the maze has been hit. Kill him. Those words change slightly from account to account. But I will say, in saying that, I guess the biggest thing in Ziegler's defense in general is that his story has remained largely the same and intact when he tells it most of the time, his version of the sequence of events. But in any event, he lays for a while, drifting in and out of consciousness, probably, I guess, because, there's again a gap of time because he doesn't call the party until
it was 9:25, I think, wasn't it?
I don't think it was quite that late. It's late, but it's not. I mean, he supposedly has arrived at the store at 7:30, and it's around 9-ish, 9:10, 9, somewhere in there, that he calls the party. And anyway, so regardless, eventually he regains enough consciousness. He eventually regains enough consciousness that he is able to, call the party and get the attention of police. And so finally, when they arrive, he moves towards the front door where he discovers keys he had given to Eunice earlier inside the front of in the inside of the front lock. He has no idea why they are there. So like there's keys just dangling from the door, according to him, inside. One last piece here. At trial, when Ziegler is asked about the gun he is supposed to have given to Ed Williams in the prosecution's theory, the one that killed his wife's parents, Ziegler states that he had no knowledge of whether the gun was in his car or not the day of the murder, and that he hadn't remembered seeing it in at least 3 weeks. Note that in other areas, Ziegler has claimed that the gun had been stolen 2 weeks before. So that's one part of his story that changed. That on the one hand, he, at trial says he just had no idea what happened to the gun that he kept in his car. And that is the gun that killed his in-laws. But then on the other hand, when he tells the story later in other forums, he says, oh, no, it had been stolen weeks before. So...
So looking at the guns, just want to get.
And there are so many guns at this crime scene. It's kind of ridiculous how many there are.
Would I be correct in saying there's the 2 guns that were the murder weapons, and those are different guns to those of the guns that the one that was in his holster and the 357 in the desk. So those 2 guns that were registered to him couldn't be connected to an actual shooting of let's say Eunice, Virginia, Perry.
Well, no, the gun that was in his car was the murder weapon of his in-law. I mean, this is the problem. Every gun in that store could be connected to Ziegler in some way. Admittedly, some by the hearsay, if you want to call it that. The connection is Ed Williams said, well, I bought them for Ziegler. But every gun, aside from those cheap guns, the ones that he claims he had no knowledge of or whatever, but one of the murder weapon in one case was the one from his car. This is part of the problem for him, is that there's guns all over the place, and every one of them has some connection to him or another. Some registered to him, and some other witnesses saying, well, he asked me to buy them.
This is where I have trouble with his story, not because it's his story, but because the when we looked at some of the cases like Darlie Roudier, we have a lot of direct testimony we can listen to and judge. And a lot of the stuff that we're getting is very fuzzy as far as what was his actual story when he showed up. And even just the way you told that story on his arrival, he walks into the dark room and he gets hit on the back of the head. And so many times whenever people are making up bullshit stories about being attacked, they get hit on the back of the head. Now, there was evidence from a doctor that said there was a lump on the back of his head, and we can double back to that. But the way he pulled out his gun and the way he fell into the desk where his 357 is quite a fortuitous way to bring extra guns. And, it's almost like if you were to ask him to reenact that, it would look really ridiculous. It's sort of the sense I'm getting, the way he's telling the story. And it seems like there's a lot of missing time within that story in itself, because that's quite a traumatic event. being attacked like that. And let's say he was hit on the head. Maybe his memory's fuzzy. If his memory wasn't fuzzy from being hit on the head, or he doesn't have any sort of concussion or evidence of concussion, I would think the story he told would be a little bit more crispy, a little less sort of fuzzy around the edges, as far as I threw my gun, I may have shot it, I may not have. I was rolling here, rolling there. At some point, this happened, and it's very just sort of like, nah, it's not very. It doesn't sound like a victim story to me. But I'm not a psychologist, and I'm not an interrogator.
Yeah, I mean, his story is so difficult. It really cuts both ways, right? Because the fuzziness, the lack of detail, all to me, it's meant to give just enough detail to reach this sort of threshold of plausibility, but not enough to hang him with anything, right? You know what I mean? It's like the practiced liar, right? Somebody who can give you. On the other hand, I mean, I will say again, if you're on the pro Ziegler camp, I mean, think about this. Like, there are 5 guns at this crime scene. 28 bullets are fired, and all of them by this guy. You know what I mean? And it's a multi-step plan. A million things could have gone wrong. Some of them did. If you're the prosecution, if you're believing of the prosecution's theory, like Charlie Mace brings Felton Thomas to the scene, and then Felton Thomas winds up walking away, which means he becomes at least a quasi-witness, although according to Felton Thomas, he never saw any shots fired or bodies or anything like that. Ed Williams is not killed. Ed Williams gets away. It is, and you have to ask yourself, like, I mean, it's 1975, so it's a long time ago, but it's not like ancient history. If you're going to shoot, why did you go to the trouble of getting 2 unregistered guns, the RG cheapy ones, and then shoot his in-laws with his own registered gun? If you believe the prosecution's theory, what was the point of that? And again, I think we mentioned this last week. Why even involve them? I mean, if the motive is his wife and the insurance on her, not only is there no point to murder, there's no financial gain to murdering her parents. It also just adds two more problems. Like, what if one of them gets away? What if Perry Edwards is on the ball enough to subdue him? What if Perry Edwards has his own gun, and when he sees Tommy start shooting, he pulls his out, and and then Ziegler gets shot? It does seem like if this was Ziegler's plan, it's a very, it's both highly thought out and also not thought out at all. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, it's kind of weird.
it's a bit, if you're thinking of a way to, knock off your wife for insurance money, it is the most convoluted way that you can do it in some respects. And I don't think that necessarily is evidence of innocence, but it's a crazy, crazy story. And I think that there was some unexpected things that happened on the night that confused everything a bit. But it's very difficult to really come to the conclusion of guilt or innocence based on his story alone, because I can't listen to his story and say it makes enough sense that I'm comfortable with it, but I can't really look at that story alone and say, yeah, he most certainly did it.
And I know we want to get to the individual potential suspects here, but there's one other piece I think we should talk about, which is, in the timeline that was left out, both of the prosecution's theory of events, although I think I included it just because, but it was not presented at trial. And in Tommy Ziegler's version of events, he doesn't account for it all. It's his friend Don Fick, who's supposed to go with him to this party. And Tommy Ziegler, so far as I know, doesn't deny that. And Fick is somebody who, at least on face value, right, should be a third-party witness that's going to confirm or deny one of the stories. He's going to be either useful to the prosecution in showing that Ziegler is lying, or useful to the defense in showing that Ed Williams is lying. Because what happens is Fick goes to Ziegler's house when Ziegler doesn't show up at their agreed-upon time, which was also 7 o'clock. And again, Ziegler, what plan is this where he's planning on, meeting Ed Williams at his house at 7 o'clock and meeting Don Fick at 7 o'clock and delivering Christmas presents with Ed Williams, which is why Ed Williams is coming in the first place. I don't understand what this plan is. But in any event, Fick waits for an hour, figures Ziegler's just late like always, and then eventually says, all right, fine, I'm going to drive over there. And, what happens? He drives by 3 times, once at 8, and sees nobody's car there. Once, like a few minutes later, sees Ed Williams's car there, and actually I think sees Ed Williams in the truck. And then the third time he comes, Ed Williams's truck is gone. But now he sees the Oldsmobile that the Ziegler had borrowed or had swapped with his other employee locked in the garage. And at that point he gives up, and that's by about 8:15. Now I say this because I'm like, follow this closely, right? Either Williams or Ziegler may be the main perpetrator of this crime, right? But Fick is a spectator. So you would expect that his is going to align with one of them, but it doesn't align with either of them. Because if Fick could be lying, right? But why would he be lying? Why would he lie about this showing up at 8 and 8:10, 8:15, and then seeing what he sees? Well, because, you say to yourself, well, maybe he's in league with Ziegler and they're friends. And so he's trying to help Ziegler out. But then if he's trying to do that, why is he trying to do, why doesn't he then maintain control of the investigation, which he has the opportunity to do, but he doesn't. And then if Fick is, trying to manipulate the case, in other ways, it just gets really bizarre.
Fick recused himself, didn't he?
He did. And so that suggests that he's not lying particularly. And then here's what, to me, the way this winds up parsing out is, if Williams, as he claims, was there from 7:30 until the close to 8:30, that's what Williams's story is, that he waited there for basically an hour while, first Ziegler wasn't there. Then he shows up with Mays and Felton Thomas, and and Ziegler says to him, "Hey, can you wait here while I do some stuff with these guys?" And then they disappear for a while, and Williams just sits there while Ziegler's basically busy killing Charlie Mays. Felton Thomas wanders off. Then Ziegler comes back, and then finally around 8:30, he takes Williams over to the furniture store. But if that's what happened. Williams himself only mentions one visit from the Ficks. He says he only sees the Ficks drop by once, but the Ficks say they dropped by twice while Williams's truck was there.
So this is where, because this will be a good segue into Williams, but when we talking about Fick's testimony, it's plausible that he could be embellishing the number of times he drove by the house to act as an alibi for what is a good friend of his. Even if he doesn't believe he's guilty, it's not implausible that he's trying to support his friend to say, look, there's no wrongdoing, and here's why, and here's how I know. I drove by multiple times. Now, what I said on the last episode was, I believe personally he was there once, as Ed Williams was there, and I believe Felton Thomas mentions he sees Ed Williams waiting there during one of his passes.
For sure.
And
by he you mean Fick, or by
no. So Felton Thomas confirms he sees Edward Williams.
Well, Ed Williams had to be there because that's where they met, right?
I believe Don Fick confirmed that he saw Edward Williams there when he pulled up. There was because I think and Edward
Williams couldn't ID him, but he said he saw a truck matching Ed Williams's truck's description, and he saw Ed Williams, a black guy at the wheel. So
so for me, that is interesting information in itself, because we have three-way corroboration of three people that are largely unrelated and have different paths on that night all around the Ziegler house. Now, what happens with Fick after that? It doesn't necessarily, because I think he came back and said, can you repeat again what happened? So the first time he sees Edward Williams and sees nothing else. He drives by.
The first time I think he claims he saw nothing in particular. Like the place was just shut up. When he drives by the second time, I think, is when he sees Williams' truck. And then the third time the truck is gone. So he only sees Williams once. The third time the truck is gone, but the Oldsmobile is sitting in the parking lot, or sitting in the garage. So he drives by three times. First time, nothing. Second time, Ed Williams. Third time, Ed Williams' truck is gone, but the Oldsmobile, which hadn't been there before, is now parked in the garage.
So I think he's there, or is that what he's contending? Because the Oldsmobile.
Well, then he gets out of the car and knocks and does all this stuff, but he doesn't get an answer. And the problem with that timeline is it's all after 8 o'clock. And so the reason why that's a problem for Ziegler is Ziegler basically, his story is he left the furniture store at 7:30 roughly, maybe as late as 7:45 with Ed Williams for the last time, that he was never back. But then how'd the Oldsmobile get there? On the other hand, which Fick says he saw. On the other hand, the problem for the prosecution is Don Fick says that he saw Ed Williams's truck there from like 7:30 all the way through 8:30, and that tends to help Ziegler out because or I'm sorry, it
helps Ed Williams out.
I'm sorry, I mean, it helps Ed Williams out because Fick did not. I'm sorry, Fick did not see Ed Williams' truck, whereas the prosecution's theory is that Williams was sitting in that driveway for a solid hour, but Fick only saw him once. So again, like what happens is that both sides, nobody can make any sense of it, right? Like everybody's testimony doesn't line up. And so the whole thing gets dropped because Fick's testimony doesn't seem to support exactly what the prosecution's theory is, which is that Ed Williams sat there for an hour while Ziegler was running around doing all this stuff. Nor does it support what Ziegler says happened, which is that I left around 7:30, 7:45 and never came back because now like the Oldsmobile appears from nowhere. Yeah. So this is the problem, right?
So for me, then that brings us to Edward Williams, because I think we can sort of leave Mr. Fick in the background as somebody who can give some piece of information, but nothing really that sort of confirms much more outside of we know that he saw Ed Williams there at 7:30. Ed Williams saw him pass by at about sort of circa that time that he was there. So Ed Williams as a possible, so Tommy Ziegler, in my view, we right now we don't have enough information to confirm he's done anything or done nothing based on his story. Would you agree with that?
Yes. No. I mean, it's hard at this point. It's hard to know.
Okay. So Ed Williams, really interesting character in this because he's really part of a lot of the, I guess, the moving parts that could imply criminal intent, either from Ed Williams or from Ziegler or from both as a possible component here. And this starts at about June when, according to Ed Williams, Tommy Ziegler asked Ed Williams to get some hot guns, referring to untraceable guns. And this is about the same time, which I find interesting. This isn't right around the same time he gets the insurance policies out on Eunice.
Yes.
So right around that same time, he was thinking insurance policies.
Well, the insurance policy actually is purchased. The guns were purchased in the summer, in June of 75. Yeah. And the insurance policy he purchases in the fall. So it suggests sort of a long-range, long-term plan.
So okay, so we can't, if it was in June, I'd find that a little bit more compelling. It's like, okay, so to do this month insurance policy on wife and get untraceable guns. Now, it still is a bit suspicious that those two things happened. However, Tommy Ziegler denies he ever asked Edward Williams for, quote, hot guns. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah. He says he had nothing to do with it.
Now, Ed Williams went to see what's his name? David Smith? To get guns, which I think he worked for a pawn shop or a local pawn shop.
I know what you're talking about, but I forget.
Frank Smith. Now, what is an interesting component, and I think before we went live, I told you this was something that I found interesting that I hadn't read until now, is on the stand, Frank Smith corroborates the story essentially to a degree that Edward Williams was working in sort of hand in hand with Tommy Ziegler to get these hot guns. Because there was a phone call Frank Smith had, which I'm sure you're aware of, with Tommy Ziegler. So he called the furniture store. Now, what the appeal documentation will say is he didn't directly confirm he spoke to Ziegler, wasn't able to confirm that he saw Ziegler or had confirmation that the voice on the phone was Ziegler. But he believed it to be Ziegler at the time. So for it to not be Ziegler, Ed Williams would have had somebody at the furniture store who was working with him to sound like Tommy Ziegler on the phone. And that seems like a lot of coordination to me. Listening to this, it's really hard to say that Frank Smith and Edward Williams are both lying when you now have multiple people who are telling the same story from different perspectives about Tommy Ziegler and these hot guns.
Yeah. I mean, and the thing also is that it helps provide more connection, right? I mean, although it's circumstantial, it can't be proven, but it's certainly highly suggestive, and you can draw your own conclusions. It just suggests that Tommy was involved in getting those guns in some respect, and he doesn't really have his just like blanket denial. I mean, again, what that does is it prevents him from having to lie. And so you can't poke holes in it. But it's certainly, I mean, the guy obviously loves guns, right? He's got one in the desk, one in the car, one on his holster on him.
I don't want my wife to know about these guns. So, because it doesn't prove that he's murdered anybody, although we're going to come to it. The guns that we're talking about were the guns that were used in the murder. So for those two specific guns, the hot guns specifically were the ones that were used to kill both the in-laws, the wife, and
no. Again, his in-laws were killed by one of the guns registered to him, not the hot guns.
I thought both guns were attributed. So that's
no, the one from his truck that he claims alternately that was either just went missing and he didn't know when,
so
or
not the one in his holster, not the 357 that he accidentally stumbled into and opened the drawer at his desk whilst he was getting attacked.
Right.
It sounds more ridiculous the more I talk about it.
Right.
This is the gun that was stolen out of his car that Ed Williams had access to. He had access to that vehicle.
Right, and that's his claim. Like basically, that anybody that he kept his truck open, and anybody could have walked in and taken it. I mean, he tries to kind of like open it up. Ziegler again. It reminds me so much of, honestly, in some senses, and I know I've mentioned this case on as we do these before, but for those of anybody who's listening to this and is familiar with Serial and Adnan Syed, who always has these stories that are just enough detail that you're like, okay, that sounds something, but like never actually takes the step of making anything like direct, either an accusation or a factual statement that can be verified one way or the other. It's, the gun was in the car. I don't remember the last time I saw it, or it was stolen a few weeks earlier and I never reported it. And I don't know what happened to it. And he never says, well, Ed Williams must have taken it, just that Ed Williams would have been one person who would have had access to it.
So, and that may be, lawyers intervening, because if you just simply say, I don't know, and no, that's not, it's not my job to do this investigation.
Yeah, you can't cross-examine that.
I can't, but even then, it's like, if I start giving you, it's that whole going back to Columbo thing, is the second you start to help the prosecution put the pieces together, it's suspicious. Why would you know anything about, what Ed Williams was doing with Frank Smith? And that's not me. I can just say, no, that wasn't me. That has nothing to do with me.
Right.
So what else do you want from me at this stage?
Yeah.
But we now have a major issue for Tommy Ziegler in this case, in that he's now got Frank Smith, an outsider, who is now saying, yeah, I spoke to somebody I thought was Tommy Ziegler. So like I was saying, the only alternate option, if Tommy Ziegler, if A, Frank Smith is lying, or B, Ed Williams corroborated with somebody at the furniture store to wait for somebody to call in, a la Beverly Hills Cop 2 when he was in LA, and answer the phone just to make sure, this is Frank Ziegler speaking. Tommy Ziegler speaking. So we then have that. So then fast forward to the night. What was the context for, which, I know this, but you do a better job of explaining this, the context for Edward Williams to meet at 7:30 officially?
They were going to then run around like Santa Claus around town, dropping off furniture that people had ordered. So that was supposedly the pretext for this meeting, which always has struck me as odd. And again, I don't know that Ed Williams contradicts it either. And I would just think, like, if I'm Ed Williams, and again, maybe, you're a poor migrant worker, you need the work, you're not in a position to turn down money, but like, I don't know, like, I'm going to run around Christmas Eve delivering furniture. Also, who the fuck gets furniture delivered on Christmas Eve? Of course, I just did. So I can answer my own question. And it was around 10 to 2. But like, this is like after hours. This is dark. It's 7 p.m. The lights are out. Stores are closed. People are having gone to mass, maybe, if they went Christmas Eve. I mean, that was after Vatican II, so you could. Or other services. They're with their families. It doesn't seem like furniture delivery time.
It's maybe it's like a Christmas Carol thing, because Tommy Ziegler maybe watched that film earlier in the day, and Charles Dickens, Scrooge, went ahead and got a duck for got a duck for the Cratchits a goose.
That was Christmas morning.
Day. That was this is Christmas Eve, so this is maybe I'll get some furniture for people. It is a bit strange, because I think if Tommy Ziegler is confirming, we were going to deliver furniture. What's the time? Like, delivering furniture isn't like, okay, I'm going to spend 40 minutes delivering furniture. There's a whole component of, okay, we've delivered this lazy boy. If I'm getting a lazy boy I didn't expect, I need help getting it into the house. So For me, that delivering furniture component is like a 3-hour endeavor that evening. That kills his whole night. Forget the bourbon.
There are a couple of other things to think about, as you're like contemplating like both Ziegler's story and potential guilt, right? So for example, if you believe, like in Ziegler's version of events, you have to think, well, exactly how did these murders take place, right? You have to wonder about that. If Ziegler doesn't do it, well, who does and how?
Well, Ziegler, that's the problem we're having with Ed Williams being involved at 724 at that number.
Yeah,
because we know. It's possible. Well, I guess it's possible he could have committed the murder. So, okay, here's a possibility. Ed Williams was the murderer. He shot the family of Tommy Ziegler and then rocked up to the house and waited by 7:30. Because that
would answer a question that you have to wonder about, which is how did anybody get in? So, like, let's say the family goes in, Mrs. Ziegler and her parents, but are they ambushed? Like, if they're ambushed, how did people come in? Like, did they leave the door open? Like, it's not clear, like
Eunice would have keys. She would have, because she was,
that's how she gets in. That's how she gets in and her parents get in. She doesn't lock the door behind her on Christmas Eve when the store is closed.
No, I don't think so. I know it's Florida. Florida now she would. Florida then I don't think she would.
Yeah, maybe so.
Because I wouldn't. I'd be, if I had a shop, I would Christmas Eve. And I was with my parents. I could see walking in, not locking the door because I'm planning to carry something out, or I'm going to be opening the doors anyway. I don't have any issue with the door not being locked. So it's plausible. Ed Williams, and would he not know? I guess he wasn't like a normal employee, so he wouldn't have access to the shop. So it's plausible. And again, we don't have anything really to back this up. We don't have any witness testimony to say that this was the case. But he had access to the guns. And he had time potentially to rock up there before he showed up at 7:30 at the Ziegler's house.
Yeah. Another little detail to consider. Ziegler, the night of the murders, I forgot about this. He always left the display lights on so people driving by the shop could see what was in the window, right? That night, he asked that they be turned off by his employee.
That's a different behavior.
Yes, it is.
So that's a very different behavior on a night where something very exceptional happened.
Yeah.
But the Ed Williams thing, if we were to fast forward, which is going to kind of dovetail into Charlie Mays, and I think this is a good segue.
Yeah.
Charlie Mays was shot after the fact, and that's established, or shot and bludgeoned after the fact. He wasn't at 7:24. So if Ed Williams was there at 7:24, came back, let's pick it up from there, because we now have corroboration not only from Don Fick. We have corroboration from Felton Thomas that Ed Williams was there. We have corroboration from Ed Williams that Felton Thomas was there with Tommy Ziegler and one other, which would be Charlie Mays, if you were to believe Tommy Ziegler's testimony.
Right.
Am I on track?
Yeah. No, you are on track.
So now we know that Charlie Mays is alive. Somehow, some way, either via Ed Williams, Felton Thomas, Tommy Ziegler, or Charlie Mays, the parents and in-laws are dead. Ed Williams is asked to wait, which he dutifully does, whilst Tommy Ziegler goes back. Now, this jumps into
the prosecution's version. Well,
because I think we're out of Tommy Ziegler range now at this stage.
Right.
Tommy Ziegler, I think, must be saying. Well, Tommy Ziegler says, what time did he say he went to the store at again?
He went with. He goes with Ed Williams at 7:30, and basically the implication is at 7:30 that maybe it's Ed Williams himself who like hits Ziegler the first time with the initial. He doesn't say that, but like basically they go in the store together, and obviously Ed Williams gets out without having been shot, without having been assaulted, apparently, and so it's left to implication in Ziegler's story that Ed Williams was either used as the bait to at the very least get Ziegler into the store, and then other people assaulted him, or possibly was involved in the beating of Ziegler. Ziegler also's story, as you're saying, implies heavily that Mays is alive when he shows up at 7:30 with Ed Williams, because he says this thing about Mays, a white man.
You mean Felton Thomas? Mays shows up with.
Well,
Felton
he doesn't.
Thomas.
Well, Ziegler never mentions Felton Thomas, right? Ziegler, Ziegler's story doesn't account for Felton Thomas.
So the one I couldn't find anything to confirm that Ed Williams and would they have had a connection, Ed Williams and Charlie Mays? Would they know each other? Would they be friends? Would they?
Well, I mean, if Mays was supposedly a frequent customer of the store, Ed Williams, apparently did. Nobody denies this worked. So you want to add that to your list of facts. Ed Williams. It's not like Ed Williams started working for Tommy Ziegler Christmas Eve. So if Charlie Mays was somebody who frequented the store, and these guys, I mean, you're getting dangerously close to all black people know each other, but you know what I mean? It's a small community. And these are folks who, Felton Thomas lived some distance away, as I recall. I mean, not like a lot, but like in Orlando, it was like far enough. And, so the idea is, I mean, certainly again, Ziegler's trying to leave as much without committing anything. Like he never mentions Felton Thomas. So his, I think, version of this is that if Felton Thomas knows something, it's because Felton Thomas was there, not as part of what Felton Thomas claims, like he just showed up with Charlie Mays and then Tommy Ziegler started doing all this weird stuff, trying to get, break into his own store and take them out to shoot guns. But instead, that Felton Thomas participated to some extent and then turned around and testified against Ziegler with a made-up story. That must, but Ziegler himself never says, again, because, I think it's the less he says, the less there is to directly challenge him. He never says, I saw or met Felton Thomas that night. Or Charlie Mays, for that matter. He really doesn't even say that.
The assumption is that Felton Thomas, it's confirmed he is friends with Charlie Mays.
Yes.
And Ed Williams, where we have sort of a tenuous connection at best.
Yes.
Conspired,
that the three of them conspired, right?
And for motives that are very difficult to understand, given they have very different trajectories in life leading up to this murder.
Correct. And there's not a lot of evidence that, Charlie Mays' pockets are stuffed with store receipts and maybe some cash, but there's not a lot of evidence that the store was robbed, as I understand it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously, the one thing I don't know, honestly, in knowing all this is the fate of that television. Did the television disappear, or was the television still there? Or was it ever there in the first place? You know what I mean? Like,
we have, so here, this is the crime scene photo. I wish I could zoom in on these. I can't. So the linoleum rolls crank found near May's hand. So that would imply that police looked at this and said, okay, the story from Charlie May's wife, where they were going shopping for linoleum, this is connecting these dots that he was coming back to at least pick up linoleum. Yeah. Maybe the television purchase was either fake, as Tommy Ziegler said, or just didn't happen because Charlie was too busy getting bludgeoned by somebody.
Yes.
Now, there's I think when you look at accusing Ed Williams, Charlie Mays, and Felton Thomas of corroborating collectively, the only thing I can think that could connect that is how consistent Felton Thomas's story is in identifying Ed Williams, and Ed Williams in identifying Felton Thomas, Charlie Mays, and Tommy Ziegler. Because Ed Williams says on his second pass back to the house, or his first pass to the house, he says Tommy is with two other gentlemen. Felton Thomas says we came back to the house and there was another gentleman waiting there, which was Ed Williams, or at least that's what the police believe.
Right.
So if they're working together, there would be some, they would have probably set each other up with some sort of alibi or something. But again, this is all really tenuous. And again, motive is a real struggle here.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, the presumptive motive would be robbery. But again, there's just not a lot of evidence for I mean, he's for both, for Charlie Mays. And the robbery story, I'm sorry, I just I got to throw in the white man thing that Ziegler claims, because that's another level. Then if it's a robbery, what is it? And I think Ziegler's vague claim is that this wasn't really about a robbery. This was about really vengeance for the same vague lawsuit thing that had happened. And somehow he's being
conspiracy theory.
Right. That Ziegler's being taken care of, as a way of getting him out of the way of something vague and nefarious, Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, I think that's a really good point, because there was, and I read a bit about that, and I just found it so, it kind of goes against the whole Occam's law principle that I really sort of guide myself by when I look at these principles, because you have now a whole lot of actors in play when it comes to killing Tommy Ziegler or killing Tommy Ziegler's family and injuring him to the point that he survives with an injury that may or may not kill him, and getting. So here's another element to this, Charlie Mays. So can we keep that sort of a pin in that? Because one of the other things I want to
Yeah.
mention is DNA tests were done in 2003, and this was something I spoke about briefly with you last week. And one of the things, and I read this on one of the follow-up appeals, because Tommy Ziegler changed his story after the DNA had been tested, the appeal for DNA. So the first DNA test was confirming that the blood on his shirt wasn't that of his father-in-law. And what the DNA test showed was blood on Tommy Ziegler's shirt was that of Charlie Mays, which would be consistent if you are battering somebody in the head with some sort of blunt object. You can't kill somebody by bludgeoning them in the head without making some sort of mess. So the blood on his shirt was that of Charlie Mays, not of his father-in-law's.
Well, now keep in mind, his original story was that he, I believe, remember he was swinging wildly with the gun once the gun jammed, and he's sure that he got somebody good with it. So, I guess his version is that's, maybe that was Charlie Mays, and then that's how the blood got on him. And in fact, maybe that's how although I don't care how good of a shot you take with somebody with a handgun, using it as a blunt object, I don't think you could kill them with it. The way that Charlie Mays was ultimately killed, which was being,
it wasn't a one-shot deal. He wasn't hit in the head once, and it was because it is possible to hit somebody in the back of the head in a way that there was a cricketer a professional cricket player. I don't know if I'm saying that right to my fellow English.
A cricketer, I think it is a cricketer.
Yeah. Yes, a cricketer died. It was in the England national team, and this would have been when I first moved here about 50.
Yeah, but he got hit in the head with a cricket bat. I'm imagining
a ball,
right?
So it was a spin ball. So cricket, they bounce the ball off the ground sometimes, or they'll throw it straight at the wicket, and they have what's called a spin ball that'll hit the ground and then spin off in another direction. And I think he had turned, and it hit him on the back of the head. He stumbled a little bit and then fell over, ultimately dying on the scene.
Damn.
So. We watched a story last night of a guy who was on death row. It was on court TV, my wife and I, and he was on not death row. He was fighting for his life as the killer, because he got shit faced. He got in an argument with somebody, swigged a beer, walked out into the street, punched somebody in the head, and that killed him. So it is possible to kill somebody with a single blow from a fist or from a bat or whatever.
All right, I take it back. So maybe that's how Ziegler accounts for what happened. But I know what you're going to say. Go ahead.
I think that to have the amount of blood he had on his shirt, and I think that the injuries aren't consistent with a single lucky shot to the head.
No, they're not.
So I don't think those stories corroborate with each other that, I just swung and it was dark and I couldn't see anything. And how dark is this store? I mean, it is a warehouse. But
remember, he had Curtis Dunaway turn off the only lights in the store, so it's pretty fucking dark, I'd say. Although he claims also that the power was cut at some point, right? It's not just his claim. I think they did confirm that. So I guess his story.
The problem I have with his story leading up to this one, the blood of Charlie Mays on his shirt is, for me, damning. It is damning. The fact that the DNA backs this up, and the fact that he changed his version of events as to what he was testing before and after those DNA tests. So
what does he say after? Yeah, what does he say after once they?
This is what I was trying to find, and I didn't have that ready. But even in the appeal, it even mentioned, and I'll have to find it. Balls. I'm gonna have to come back to it, but in the appeal, there's a footnote there, number 14. It said that his story, I believe he was testing to confirm that he wasn't the one who killed Perry Edwards. And then after the DNA showed that it was Charlie Mays' blood, I think he reworded it to say, well, yeah, of course it was Charlie Mays' blood. That's what we would expect, because I was defending myself and Charlie was found dead. But then he was then shot twice after the fact. Now, there was enough light in the store, I would believe, from the door being open. There was street lights on outside. It's not as if he's walking into a planetarium where they shut the doors and they turned off all the lights. There is going to be some ambient light in the store. It's not in a vacuum. And if that's the case, he's going to have some visibility of something. White guy, black guy, gun, bat, whatever. So if he's hit somebody in the head and killed him, we know that the gunshots that were in Charlie Mays happened after he was bludgeoned. So
wait, how do we know that?
Well, because he died of his Well, I guess no. I thought because he died from his.
He was killed by the beating. He was not killed by the bullets, but I don't know
So
that
he would have
we
been
know for
shot and
sure
then
that
fighting for
one.
himself. I think I misread
Yeah,
that, and I think you're actually. I'm calling myself out for being a complete dick. So
that's all right.
but he was killed by the bludgeoning, and yeah, I guess if he was shot and Tommy Ziegler doesn't remember how many he shot, he just randomly shot his gun out there. I find the whole thing difficult,
Yeah,
especially
I
given.
do. Go ahead.
Well, sorry. The last thing is that Charlie Mays isn't going to be standing there taking shots to the head. He's going to be fighting back. And the amount of injuries on Tommy Ziegler, he had a shot to the stomach and he had a lump on the back of the head. Am I missing anything with his physical injuries?
No, that's really the hardest part of his story is that think about this. I mean, his wife is shot, I believe, in the back of the head. His mother-in-law is shot in the head. His father-in-law did put up a fight, but was ultimately, shot, I think, in the head.
He apparently he put up quite a fight, which might account
Yes.
for the lump on the back of his head.
Right. Yeah, that
Tommy
might be
Ziegler's.
how Ziegler got it. And Charlie Mays, when apparently the shooting was not successful, was beaten savagely. Savagely, with the clear intent of killing him. So you have four bodies in this store plus Ziegler when the police arrive, and four of them are treated in such a way that it is clear that the intent of the person treating them was to kill them. And then you have Tommy Ziegler, who somehow gets off, even though he's in some senses, I guess maybe Charlie Mays. I don't know what Charlie Mays's body was like, but Ziegler is youngish. He's like in his early 30s. He's fit. He's he would be the person you'd think that you would, if you're out there to kill somebody, if you're going to do that to Charlie Mays, why aren't you doing it to Tommy Ziegler? Right? If that is Ziegler's story is, well, people came in to kill me. So that's why he has to have this vague notion of like a conspiracy, where I guess the idea of the conspiracy is now rather than kill Ziegler, we're going to frame him for it. But, I mean, again, he won't say that directly. It's just sort of the general, gist of things.
The conspirators must be thinking, man, Tommy has got the dumbest story about what happened. We're all right. It's like, okay, so let me try to find a logical reason to support.
Well, do you want to go through some of because we had talked about going through some of the alternate suspects. Ziegler is obviously emerging as the prime suspect.
Yeah.
You can see why.
You know what I'll do is I'll finish with I'll come back to this because Charlie Mays is another character of interest. I think is that one, or Felton Thomas?
Both of them. I mean, if you believe Tommy Ziegler's story, or if you think that, because this is the problem, I think, from the prosecution's perspective, as wonky as his story is, as suspicious as all of his actions are, I don't feel an exceptionally strong. The furniture store, by all accounts, was doing well. It was not in financial difficulty. So $500,000, that's $500,000, especially in 1965. But it's not like he needed it. And if you could show the furniture store was circling the drain, he had bills to pay, and he was in arrears, this or that. But there was no evidence for that. We've already discussed why his plan, at multiple points in the prosecution's theory, I mean, you'd have to think he must have just been nuts. It doesn't make any sense. He's killing his wife for the insurance money, but he's involving her parents for no good reason and making his life that much harder by doing so. And not only this, but tripling the possibility that he gets caught. If you just believe that there's a certain odds that you get caught if you commit one murder, and those odds triple if you commit three. And then you add Charlie Mays to sort of frame him. But then, you don't really do an excellent job of that. You make multiple appointments for the same time on the same day, 7:00, that seem to contradict each other in their purpose. I'm going to go to a Christmas party at 7:00 with the fix. Oh, I'm also going to meet Ed Williams at 7:00 at my house, according to the prosecution, although Ed Williams says it's 7:30. Oh, I'm also going to, take my parents to the furniture store and murder them at 6:45. I mean, what the fuck is this? You know what I mean? You have to ask yourself, if Ziegler is the murderer, his actions are to the point that you have to kind of question his mental competency. You know what I mean? I
don't know. That's if you look at this series of events as the planned out series of events, you're 100% right. But you made a point last week that Felton Thomas is a bit of a wild card in this.
He is.
And if that's the case, then if you're thinking on the fly, you could see a series of events happening along the lines of what happened that involved the people that involved.
I don't think there's any good way to explain why her parents are there. I really
parents
don't.
are at the store.
Yeah, well, I mean, I understand that it's because they're going to pick out the first, but why? If you want to murder your wife to for the insurance money, why the fuck are you murdering her parents?
Because
like, unless it's just raw hatred.
So let's theorize here. So if she dies and the parents aren't there, she owns part of the store, correct? So what is the agreement with what does their will say? You know, if they don't have a will, does that go then to her parents? Do her parents then get involved in the store?
So he's that greedy. He's after whatever they've got, you know, or he's afraid that they might put in for her some of the life insurance money, you know, as benefit. Although I doubt they were named beneficiaries.
No, but if I hadn't, so my wife and I did our will about 5 years ago, and if let's say I had died, it wouldn't be that my half would go to her. My half would go to my family, just sort of circa default. Or I don't know if it is, though. It depends on what the law is in Florida. If anybody can watch this and can comment, what happens if you don't have a will and that money goes?
I think it goes to the spouse.
So
if you're married, I mean, I think almost everywhere, if you are married, you know, it's presumptive. Without a will, everything goes to the remaining spouse.
Unless her parents weren't meant to be with her that night, and he had the wheels in motion by having Ed Williams.
But how can you not know on Christmas? Like Christmas Eve, people make plans for Christmas Eve. People don't just show up on Christmas Eve.
No, I've had people show up on Christmas Eve. It's possible.
It's like the ghost of Christmas past, right?
It's happening. I think I don't know that it's interesting, but I don't think it's unusual. Like, we're assuming that Tommy Ziegler had a great relationship with his wife, which there's no way to confirm that. And we're assuming that Tommy Ziegler got along really well with his in-laws. There's no way to confirm that. And Tommy Ziegler's friends and family say he was a normal, nice guy. He could be a freaking psychopath, and he wouldn't understand. You know, so for me, yeah, it's weird. But his in-laws being killed for me are the least unusual part of this case. But that doesn't mean it's not unusual, and I think that is saying something. That the least unusual part are random people were killed for the sake of insurance money.
I mean, if you leave that part out, to me, if you don't think that that's weird, then the rest of his plan sort of makes sense, but it falls apart. But if his plan was okay, although again, apparently part of his plan was, well, this is where you get into the Ed Williams question. Was Ed Williams part of the plan? Was he part of? See, the one thing is that there's so many murders and so much going on that maybe, and perhaps the easiest way to explain all the discrepancies between Ed Williams' story and Tommy Ziegler's story is that, in fact, Tommy Ziegler had conspired with Ed Williams. He brought Ed Williams in on the plan. But what Ed Williams didn't know or understand was that the final twist in Ziegler's plan was to double cross Ed Williams. And, that he was going to, so in other words, all right, I need to kill all three of these people for whatever reason I've cooked up. I hate my in-laws, or there's more money to be gained if I do it this way, or whatever it is. So I'm going to kill all three of these people. I'm going to get Charlie Mays here. I'm going to set him up frame. But I might need some other people to help me move stuff around. So Ed, listen, I'll split. I'm going to get all this insurance money. Join me in the conspiracy. I'll do this with you. And then, but wink, wink, or my fingers are crossed behind my back, because I know that I don't want to split nothing. And the last step of my plan is, when everything else is done, I'm going to get Ed Williams in this store and I'm going to shoot him last. And then I'm going to call the cops and be like, look at what I discovered. I sent my in-laws and my wife to come pick up furniture. And then I show up here and there's just this mess of bodies. And then we must have been getting robbed by these people. I don't believe it. Da, 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 da. I mean, that would seem to have been the plan, more or less. But he includes so many, and I guess going and getting Ed Williams and Charlie Mays to shoot the guns. Well, obviously, Charlie Mays and Felton Thomas. He doesn't counting on Thomas. So
can I just jump? I just want to make sure people understand this really quick. Hold that thought for a second. So for anybody who hasn't, read up on this, there was a part of the story in which Felton Thomas says, after we left the store, he took myself and Charlie to an orange grove to look at these guns and shoot them. And the argument was that the fingerprints on the guns that were shot were found with the fingerprints wiped, And the defense was like, well, why the hell would he have him shoot the guns, get fingerprints on them just to wipe the fingerprints? And the second part was it would have had to have happened within 21 minutes. Therefore, it's not plausible. So go ahead. You were saying, so the Orange Grove, that's what was happening. So
Yeah, the Orange Grove. And so like the only wrinkle for him really is, I mean, the wrinkles are that one, Felton Thomas shows up with Charlie Mays. And so he has to kind of make the decision on the fly that, all right, I'm going to try to, this is just one more body for the pile, basically. I'm going to try to include Felton Thomas in this. But then it goes wrong because Felton Thomas eventually catches wise and leaves.
When does he leave exactly? Because I think
so
this is
when
a key point.
Right. So what happens is they shoot the guns, then they come back to the store, and this is the prosecution's theory. And I think according to what Felton Thomas says, then when they go back to the store, they try to break in, and Tommy Ziegler, is trying to break into the thing, and they're like, no, I don't want to do that. So then they go to his house and get a key. And then they come back with the key and they open the store. And it's right at that point, he invites Charlie Mays and the store's all dark. And Felton Thomas looks at it and says, like, I don't think so. I'm just going to go. And honestly, this story is a little weird too. You know what I mean? Like, why you go all through that. And then at the moment of truth, I mean, maybe you just think like, wow, Felton Thomas just heard the voice of God telling him not to go in there. Yeah. But at the same time, it's a little strange. But I mean, like if you're looking at Felton Thomas, there's basically three choices, right? He's either a liar top to bottom. He wasn't there at all. And he made this story up. God knows why, maybe to support his friend Charlie May, who knows? Or he was there. And in fact, there was a robbery and that Tommy Ziegler's innocent and that he and Charlie Mays had conspired, as we've said, with Ed Williams, and they were trying to rob the place. And, so that's why he's there. And again, for the Ziegler people, and we mentioned this last week, Charlie Mays' truck was found parked not in the furniture store parking lot, but like, in the adjacent parking lot of the hotel past it. Like it was not in a spot where you'd expect somebody to park who thinks that they're unloading a big, heavy wooden boxed TV like you had in the 70s. It's suggestive of like somebody like, why didn't they park closer? You know what I mean? Like, what was the purpose of that? And then, finally, the other possibility is that that he, like, if you believe Ziegler, if you believe Felton Thomas is lying about his story, is that yes, he was there, yes, to be a perpetrator, but there was never any real robbery intended. That this was all, that's why the truck was parked so far away. This was all part of like some kind of weird hit on Ziegler, attempt to frame Ziegler, some combination of the two. But he was there. So, I mean, those are your three choices. He either, if you believe Felton Thomas is a liar, or he's just an itinerant farm worker who doesn't know what the hell is going on and gets spooked finally by enough weird behavior. It's like, you know what, fuck this, I'm out of here.
I see. I mean, I'm trying to, because I've got a picture in my head that I'm sort of painting from all this. And to me, from what I think it's possible that Felton Thomas wasn't expected to be there.
Yes,
I think,
and then Ziegler has to adjust what he's doing.
And I think so. If we look at this sort of chronologically from what we know happened, we know Ed Williams 7:30. So Tommy Ziegler sets the wheels in motion to meet at 7:30, creates the bourbon story, and then when Felton Thomas and Charlie May show up, he's like, "Oh, the fuck, dude! I need to kill Charlie Mays and make him look like he did this, kill Charlie Mays, and then I need to get Ed Williams involved in this. So, all right, Ed, you're gonna have to stay here before I shoot you. I'm gonna go ahead and sort out this Charlie Mays Felton Thomas thing." I wonder if Felton Thomas and Charlie Mays, because there's an element here where Charlie Mays was in arrears at his store accounts,
right?
And he couldn't buy the vinyl without paying more money. And I'm wondering if there was more discussed between Charlie Mays and Tommy Ziegler, where Tommy Ziegler and Charlie Mays are guilty, and Felton Thomas was brought along by Charlie Mays to help me make it look like we've broken into the shop. So make it look like
that's interesting.
Not necessarily talk about murder. So he's gone and killed people. Felton Thomas has gone in with Charlie Mays. Well, Felton Thomas has gone in to remove the breaker from the store. And now he's like, I need to divorce this Felton Thomas from Charlie Mays, or I need to say, okay, let's have Felton Thomas included with this. I'm gonna, we're gonna ask Ed to wait. Felton Thomas fortuitously leaves, or somehow he gets away. And whether that's he's implicated in this crime, so he's being quite, quiet on his portrayal of events on the witness stand, I don't know. Tommy Ziegler won't talk about his involvement with Felton Thomas because, again, that implicates him in sort of a murder scheme with Felton Thomas, or a break-in scheme with Felton Thomas and Willie Mays, which makes Charlie Mays, which makes him look guilty. He then, Felton Thomas is off ski, shoots Charlie Mays, goes back to get Ed Williams because he's lost this Ponzi, really. And then brings Ed Williams in, tries to shoot him. It doesn't work. And then, thinking on his feet, shoots himself in the stomach. And Ed Williams,
because now he has to. He's like out of options at that point.
I can't get around. I cannot get around Tommy Ziegler's story as to how things broke down. Because essentially, like what I was saying before, for me to believe his story, I have to believe Charlie Mays stood there fighting with his head like this, like pretty much in the way of the gun, just like, go ahead and hit me. That's not how a fight works. Charlie Mays, I don't think was necessarily like a slight guy, or wasn't somebody who couldn't at least defend himself partially.
I mean, he's a migrant worker. I'll bet he's pretty strong.
Pretty goddamn strong, yeah. So I can't envision a scenario where Charlie Mays is. I mean, to be fair, if he was shot first, he would be easier to dispatch. But to wildly swing your arms and to do so in a fashion that bludgeons someone to death and not be able to register that in some sort of story, there's nothing wrong with him saying, yeah, Charlie was in the store. I have no idea why. My in-laws and my wife were dead, and he was trying to do me in. So I beat the shit out of him and I killed him because I thought he was the one that killed my family. What would you do? He doesn't say that. That's weird. Why would you not just say, yeah, it was Charlie? Because Felton Thomas is involved? Because Ed Williams is involved and they're all working in cahoots?
Yeah. I mean, I think that, I wonder if Felton Thomas isn't the answer. Maybe his original plan was to say something like that, but that Felton Thomas suddenly becomes a witness, not to the events, but to what Charlie Mays was there for. Yeah. And he knows that he can't just be like, oh, I just showed up and Charlie Mays was in there, waving a gun around and my in-laws were dead. So I got into a fight with him. Like, that story's not going to work anymore.
No, because there's two guys now.
I do think that Felton Thomas is highly credible. I will say that. I mean, he turned himself into police. He didn't have a home as you and I would understand it. So he kind of, was truly itinerant. And I just don't think, it's hard to see a world where he is somehow the mastermind, or even if he's just a low-level participant, what do you get out of it? Nothing.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like, well, for example, if he was, there was cash in Charlie Mays' pockets, which, by the way, I just confirmed. If Felton Thomas was there and part of it, and indeed Tommy Ziegler was incapacitated when he left the store, why wouldn't you grab the cash? I mean, you're an itinerant, like, you're not going to grab. I mean, like, I don't know, just little stuff like that. I think, like, it just makes it very unlikely. I don't think, and I hate to be this way, but I doubt he was sophisticated enough to cook up this whole scheme. And really, for what is basically a low-level robbery. And then, what he says, another piece that he doesn't have a change of clothes as far as I'm aware. So he's involved in this huge bloody sequence and then shows up at a shopping mall. There's never any testimony that says, well, Felton Thomas showed up and he was like drenched in blood, which we thought was a little odd on Christmas Eve. You know what I mean? Like, there's no indication that happened. He does turn himself in right away, like at 2:30 in the morning when he finds out the police are looking for him. But, which says to me also, like, he doesn't do it straight away because he doesn't know for sure what's going on. He just doesn't like it. And then when he hears something's going on, he's like, "Oh, I better say what I know." I mean, that all speaks to somebody to me who's very credible. So I would take him away as any kind of a participant. But if he's not a participant, I think that's even worse for Ziegler, because then, like, it makes his story true, first of all, and then his story makes Ziegler sound horrible. So
and Ed Williams is the only other character in this that could perceivably have been involved in this
Well,
and
there
knows
are a
more than
couple of
he
other
says.
suspects we haven't talked about, which I'm just going to mention them briefly because they don't have any direct. But if you're thinking about the conspiracy, I know there's a theory out there that Eunice had a brother who was supposedly something of a sketchy character, and that maybe it was he who, if there was a grand conspiracy, arranged this grand conspiracy, and that he was the white man who said Mays has been hit, let's get rid of him or whatever.
Mm.
That the brother was after his parents' money, and that's why also the parents were killed. So you have that theory out there. There's also a theory because I think I mentioned this last broadcast. There was nearby a armed robbery, if I recall correctly, of like a gas station or something like that very night. It's like, wow, what a night in Winter Garden, right? But on Christmas Eve, but and like this person wasn't necessarily looked into. And so, obviously for the Ziegler defenders, that's a big deal, because, there's somebody unknown perpetrator within like 5 minutes of where this furniture store was robbed, also committing an armed robbery. Why wasn't that looked into? So you do have a couple of suspects, but the problem is for both of them, I just don't know. I mean, at least the one with Eunice's brother, the idea that you're going to frame Ziegler makes some degree of sense, I guess, because he needs a scapegoat. Like he has a clear motive if it's his parents and their money that he's after. So he'll need a scapegoat. And it also keeps Ziegler out of the way. So maybe he can get Eunice's money too. The other guy, I don't know how you would ever, you know what I mean? Like, okay, so random guy showed up and did all this. Well, fine. But, how does that fit in with Ziegler's whole, this one guy shows up, and I don't know. Doesn't make a lot of sense.
Because he even says, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but Ziegler even gets the impression the way he portrays what he thinks he heard. That they reference his name as if they know him.
Yes, exactly.
And
he's definitely trying to plant the seed that this was more than about some simple robbery gone wrong.
Yeah, and it's difficult. It's really difficult to get past the fact that the other players involved. The hot gun thing it really does make it difficult to sort of leap to these additional perpetrators when it's not an everyday occurrence for somebody to ask somebody to get a hot gun. We have corroboration that Tommy Ziegler did want a hot gun for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Ed Williams is somebody that could know a lot more than this than he's letting on, and he's gotten away, just gotten out of this because there's not going to be any point Tommy Ziegler is going to then give up Ed Williams because it's going to really indict his character. But I think Ed Williams being involved, because the one thing that I couldn't figure out, if he killed Charlie Mays before he brought Ed Williams back to the store, why didn't he have blood all over him at that time? And that's the thing that I can't really put together on a timeline. Now there was some story. So Ed Williams did say he did go into his house, and there was a whole storyline with him going into his house, getting something, coming back out, wiping a car down, and heading out. And if he got changed, then why did he have blood on his shirt that Charlie May's blood was on when he was found, perceivably after Ed Williams ran off? That is a big unknown. And that doesn't mean Tommy Ziegler wasn't involved. If anything, Ed Williams' involvement doesn't absolve.
I remember him wiping stuff, but did they ever say his shirt that he changed?
No. No, they never said that. They said he went in the house and came back out, but he wouldn't have changed it. He would have had to have changed his clothes at the furniture store, or come back with like a coat or something to hide the blood on him. Changed out of that to take Ed Williams back if Ed Williams was clueless or Ed Williams just wasn't paying attention to the shit ton of Charlie May's blood on him. Walked into the store and then, tried to kill Ed Williams, or Ed Williams was involved in some way and he ran off. I don't know. And then Tommy Ziegler then put the bloody clothes back on, or like the bloody clothes. If he was shot when he says he was shot and Ed Williams was with him, and was shot at the end of this sort of ordeal, why isn't Ed Williams saying, well, yeah, he had a shit ton of blood on his clothes when he came back to pick me up? Because we know there was a shooting and there was an altercation at 7:24. We know Charlie Mays probably died after that, like 8 o'clock, 8:30. If he's picking up Ed Williams at 8:30 and Charlie Mays has been bludgeoned by Tommy Ziegler, why isn't Tommy Ziegler bloody in Ed Williams' account? It makes him suspicious.
Yeah. No, it does. And
I'd love to see. I can't find it for the love of Christ. I want to read that testimony of Ed Williams in the cross-examination.
Well, perhaps we need to do another episode. I mean, gee,
If we
with some
find it, I think we
conclusions.
do another episode on examining Ed, because
Because Ed Williams will take a while, he
yeah.
will.
Ed
And
Williams is somebody to me that I believe, just to sort of give my summary here, I believe Tommy Ziegler is involved 100%. And I think Ed Williams 50-50 is involved. And I think Charlie Mays and Felton Thomas are a bit unfortunate. Well, apologies to Charlie May's family. Very unfortunate in that instance. Felton Thomas is a bit lucky, but unfortunate to be involved.
maybe. I mean, I could honestly believe that, I think whenever I come to this case, I do, it gets so complex and the evidence just doesn't support any one account. And it does make me think that there was some kind of conspiracy that night, but that Tommy Ziegler was involved in it. And it's some version, some combination of Ed Williams, Charlie Mays, and Felton Thomas were recruited for the purpose on promise of payment, and that either Ziegler intentionally, was double crossing, or maybe there was a fight. Maybe they tried to double cross Tommy. You know what I mean? And like maybe shit just went bananas.
Yeah.
And there's so much going on, and I don't think the trial got anywhere close to the bottom of it. But having said that, I also am not at all. I mean, we're giving away the end, but I'm not at all convinced of Tommy Ziegler's innocence or claims of innocence.
No, and that's I think we are pretty much getting to. I think it's something that we may come back to, but I think Tommy Ziegler, and this sort of dovetails onto the final point, which is why he's on death row. And if we look at the outcome, I can see why he was convicted. I could also see a world where he was not convicted of murder, but suspiciously not convicted of murder. Meaning, I don't think it's obvious that he did or didn't do anything. But I'm happy. Like for me, the what happened with him being sentenced to death is really wrong. Really wrong.
I mean, that should not have happened.
And I think that's why he's been on death row for 45 years. I read that he played chess with, and whether this is true, you might be able to back this up. He played chess with what's his name? Serial killer. Famous
Ted Bundy.
Ted Bundy. So he's been on death row for absolutely years, and he's been able to bypass his sentence. And I think a lot of that is down to what the judge did. And
absolutely. I think that people of conscience. I think I said this in the first broadcast. I think people of conscience could not possibly permit the death penalty. I think I don't know what the status of Tommy Ziegler's appeals are, but I just think if push came to shove in front of the Supreme Court, they would probably stop an execution, which is why I guess an execution date has never been definitively set to avoid that outcome. Because I think the other reality is that the prosecution doesn't want any part of another trial, because it's just so, like, I think the attitude of the prosecution is something like, we got him where we want him. An execution is just not appropriate or even likely in this case, because, a judge who had a stake in it overruling a jury verdict is like wildly out of, any accepted norm of jurisprudence. And so we're just going to leave well enough alone and let it. I mean, it's obvious to me he's over 80, I think now. I don't think they're going to be executing him at this point.
No. And to be fair, if he was, it's not often that somebody will get a stay of execution 24 hours before you're due to be put to death. And that's what happened with Tommy Ziegler. He had a 24-hour stay of execution. And I think you made a good point, because a judge isn't going to want to go against a jury. And if anything, the judge is supporting a jury, because they didn't want the death sentence. And there was, in the appeal documents that I read, there's no evidence to say that this judge was doing anything nefarious or was trying to take the law. Well, was to a degree trying to take the law into his own hands, but he had a belief that, these crimes are heinous, and I don't think the jury got it right, which I believe at the time the judge can do. I don't know if you are a lawyer or a judge, or you work in law enforcement, you can correct us on this. I don't know that that's something that can happen now. And because it really sort of mitigates the whole purpose of having a jury. Why bother having a jury if the judge is just going to say, you people don't know what you're doing. I'm just going to choose based on the circumstantial case that I think you should die. It just seems very, very subjective. And this is something that I think even to have a death penalty case for a circumstantial case is problematic in itself. And we said that with Darlie Roudier.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. So I think we pick up one more time on this. I wonder how many hits did we get the first time, may I ask? Has it been
We had
unpopular?
28, which isn't bad. Which isn't bad. This
Okay.
is a case that I think is, for those of you that are watching, we had 280 for Alec Baldwin. And I think this case is not going to be favored by the Google analytics, the Google
Oh dear.
search tools, because when you search Tommy Ziegler, it is hard to find anything. So we are falling into that. Not that we're brilliant, we're not, but we get about 100 views per video, and this one was 28, which I think is good considering the low.
Well, you know what that
traffic
means is that Andrew no longer gets to choose programming, is what that means.
But I think the thing is, though, I think you do keep choosing. I think these are the ones that when people see us do cases, I think these are the ones that people are going to go back into the back catalog, and these are going to be in the bank as ones that might give us ones that I think we should come back to maybe a bit further down the line when we have more viewers that can.
I have
see
to
this
ask.
case.
I have to ask a question.
Yeah.
You say that you can't find much on this on Google. Are you spelling Tommy Ziegler's name right?
Yes.
I mean, there's like lots and lots of podcasts and things.
No, but if you go on, so if you were to do, because I use SEO tools to find the relative searches, and if you there's plenty of things on there, but you're talking about like in comparison to every other true crime case, there's a fraction of the hits and shows and things that are done on this.
I see.
Like there's
this to me is like the most fascinating true crime case there is.
Like how many have you found? How many things have you found in your quick search?
Oh well, I mean, Google returned 10 pages worth of results, and I do get
the results.
Now, which isn't the most, I agree. It says that it's actually not as many as I would have expected. 96 already displayed, and that's the end of the list, which is a little surprising to me.
What was your search though? Was it just Tommy Ziegler?
Just Tommy Ziegler. Yeah. Now I wonder if I invert the E and the I, because I'll bet a bunch of people spell his last name wrong.
Well, so no, here's what I think. Unsolved Mysteries has a lot of traffic on this. There's the top search results aren't specific. There's one podcast. But most of the search results are down to all the articles, the Orlando Sentinel articles, the free Tommy Ziegler. And when you do the other cases, you see a shit ton of podcasts, a shit ton of YouTube videos, a shit ton of Facebook things. So as far as it being imbibable content for people that are fans of true crime, this case has not been touched all that much. And the shows that I've watched, because it's so complicated, there was one show, I'm not going to name their I watched the 2 videos I saw on it. One of which was decent. The other one was a similar show to ours. And it wasn't very good. Like it just was very sort of, we spent weeks, and you spent a long time. I spent weeks reviewing this case to be able to talk on it. And this is a case that you really have to invest time in to be able to debate it, talk about it, come to conclusions on. Whereas a lot of the other cases, everything is easier just to watch an hour court case or a cross-examination and come to a conclusion. I had to dig into appeals, and I had to dig into court documents to get any information.
Yeah, no, it's true. And I think the other thing about it is I know like we're struggling to maintain a through narrative at times because there's so much going on, so many different elements. Like one thing that I've forgotten about, I'm trying to find, is that there's some indication that Charlie Mays may have been involved in another murder. Which obviously would throw some suspicion onto Charlie Mays more than there has been. And it's just stuff like that. There's also a theory out there. The guy who robbed the golf station. It was a golf station that night. Yeah. That there's at least some indication, or at least somebody's theory, I don't know how much indication there is, that guy was also supposed to be there. That the idea is that Mays, Felton Thomas, and the third dude were to go rob the furniture store. And when the furniture store turned out to be just like a big clusterfuck, the one guy just was like, fuck you people, I'm going to go rob me a gas station and go home.
But I mean, that thinking in itself sort of kills the whole idea that they were involved in what was going on at the furniture store, because the amount of coordination that went into that with multiple parties. If we were to say Ed Williams, Willie, stop doing that for the love of Christ, Charlie Mays and Felton Thomas, the coordination they need, it's not simple. It's not just like, hey, what are you doing what are you doing Christmas Eve? You want to, we talked about killing Tommy and his family might be there. Maybe it just seems strange. And I think there's a lot of, you can say that Charlie Mays, he was in arrears with the store. You could say it's perfectly plausible that Tommy Ziegler said, look, I'm going to do this insurance thing. Let's do something together and get some money. You can pay off your account. You'll get the TV. You'll get the linoleum.
I mean, the thing is, if this was just a straight robbery, I would think that, like, it's 6 o'clock on Christmas Eve, 6:30 on Christmas Eve, when these guys are in the store, right? I mean, because I think the basic idea would be that Eunice and her parents show up, and that's why they're killed. In other words, that like they went to that store to rob it with the intention, like they didn't think they were going to murder anybody. You know what I mean? Like
why
that
would
would
your
be.
truck be outside if you're robbing the store as well? Why would you be on the other side? Like, how are you going to get all that
That's a
shit
good
out of a
point.
furniture
That's a
store?
good point too. Like, so that does imply that it's not a robbery. That in fact, if they're there, it is to kill all these people.
They don't
But
want to
then,
be
how do
seen
you
being there.
convince? Yeah, how do you convince all these people who? I mean, like I could see maybe convincing people. Somebody says, "Well, we got to rub out Tommy Ziegler," but like, if I'm these people, like, why am I killing 4 people on Christmas Eve? I don't even know, right?
One Tommy Ziegler.
Yeah.
And I think it's a case that I kind of want to. We'll discuss as far as where we go with this, because I think this case is going to add value, as we grow our show. And it is growing, and I think it's one that the back catalog, it's going to come to life as one when he passes away, or if he gets another death sentence, like another execution date, and it's something we can discuss.
I think that ship has sailed.
But I'm just saying, I think there's going to be points where this is going to be picked up, and I think this is a show that I like the work that we've done, and I think people will appreciate it as we grow and get better at what we're doing. But that's a good segue. If you've been watching this long, as I've said many times before, if you haven't subscribed, you've wasted an hour and 40 minutes of your time. If you haven't invested enough to hit the subscribe button. But if you've been watching this long, please do subscribe. We are getting to a point, either we're going to do one more on Tommy Ziegler, or we're going to do a quick, I know I do want to do a palate cleanser, which is just a fun loving one live. Before we go into our next deep dive. If you have any suggestions, we have had some suggestions, actually. We do have a list of things we're going to do, which Dixon, I'll share with you. We did have one viewer come with about 5 different suggestions. And for anybody who wants to know what our sort of wheelhouse is, we really love these types of cases where the outcome is debatable. And that's part of what we do. We debate.
Yeah.
So, are you happy to call it there this week there?
I think so. I think
Dixon?
we probably exhausted everyone, including ourselves.
I can smell dinner cooking.
Yes.
So anyway, thank you everybody for watching. We will be back either next week or the week after. We're going to try to stick to every week, but it may be every other week. So please do like and subscribe. Thank you for tuning in, and look forward to seeing you next time. Dixon, take care, mate.
Thank you. Take care. Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.